Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Carrie Marsh, and I'm the director of the Clarke Historical Library. The Clarke Speaker Series is one of our signature programs, and we're really pleased to have you here, especially this evening, which is the John and Audrey Cumming Endowed Lecture. It's a biannual event of our speaker series and honors John Cumming, who was the director of the Clarke for 22 years. He was a published author, historian, collector, bibliophile, and a devoted and prolific letterpress printer. So let's begin this evening by acknowledging that today we're here on the beautiful lands maintained for generations by the Anishinaabe people, the indigenous inhabitants of Michigan, with whom we continue to partner today at Central Michigan University. So our last speaker series event for this semester is this Thursday, March 27th at 3 p.m. when Oakland County Preservation Architect Ron Campbell will talk about the history of mail order mail order kit homes. This is the opening event for our new exhibition in the Clarke, and we really hope that you all will be able to attend the 3 p.m. talk and stay for the opening reception afterwards. It'll be a good time. Have snacks with us and we can have a great conversation. We're really proud of this exhibit. It's called Build It Yourself, Bay City's Aladdin Company. So we have some of the typical housekeeping stuff. I'm going to ask you to please mute or turn off your cell phones because this event is being recorded. The recording will be available for later viewing on campus via Chipcast. By your presence here, you agree that we can put this recorded event online. And because we're recording for the Q&A, we'll have a microphone for you to use to ask your questions. So after tonight's presentation, we're holding a reception in the Clarke, and you're all invited, and I hope you all join us at the reception. Our speaker tonight brought some goodies from the Illinois Railway Museum, and then we also have flyers about his book, and with a 30% coupon. So if you want to buy the book, you'll be able to get a nice discount. So hit me up for that when we go to the reception. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Norman L. Krentel. His deep interest in the history of Michigan's electric interurban railways began with his father, who was born and raised in East Lansing. His father had a lifelong interest in Michigan's electric railway and had been able to ride many of them. In 1960, the family moved from Lansing to Chicago, and in 1963, Norm joined the Illinois Railway Museum at Union, Illinois, as a volunteer. He remains an active volunteer there today. Aware of the importance of the preservation of history, aware of the importance of the preservation of historic electric railway equipment, especially cars, he searched for, located, and participated in moving both the former Michigan Railway Company steel passenger interurban car and a Wood Michigan Railway, later Lakeshore Electric Railway freight car to the museum in Illinois. So Norm began researching the history of the Michigan Railway Company very early on in the 1960s, and in the 1970s, he began recording interviews with former railway employees, after which he began writing the history of the company. That book is Michigan Railway Company, the Northern and Southern Divisions, the first comprehensive history of the Michigan Railway Company, published in December 2024 by Michigan State University Press. So to hear more about that and enjoy some of Norm's enthusiasm for the electric railway in Michigan, please join me in welcoming Norm Krentel.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Okay, this works. So, thanks a lot for coming today, and appreciate the enthusiasm. I've been interested in this subject for a long time, and hopefully I won't bore you too much with this show. But I've got a batch of slides to depict the electric railways, photos, and a few maps, and some recollections that I've heard from others. So Anyway, hopefully you'll enjoy it, and try to imagine transportation in Michigan in an era when you could ride a high-speed electric railway across the entire width of the Lower Peninsula. An electric railway that received its power from hydroelectric dams, maybe on the Owosso River, Muskegon River, Grand, Kalamazoo, Manistee Rivers, all providing electricity that they shipped south to feed their biggest customer, the power company's biggest customer until 1916, had been the electric railways. So anyway, the book is Michigan Railway Company, Northern and Southern Divisions, and I'll see if I can make this go to the next slide. The map really will help define the scope of the Michigan Railway Company. The properties are really represented by solid lines in different colors. So in the northeast, we have between Saginaw, Bay City, and Flint in blue with a branch over to Frankenmuth, the railway's Northeastern Division. The title of this book is the Michigan Railway's Northern and Southern Divisions. The Northern Division are those lines marked in red going north from Jackson to Lansing to Owosso, St. John's. The Southern Division was the lines west from Jackson to Battle Creek and Kalamazoo. These two divisions really form the basis for this large interconnecting electric railway system. Going from Kalamazoo north to Grand Rapids and Battle Creek to Allegan was another division, the Western Division, and then from Grand Rapids to Holland and Saugatuck was yet another division, that would be the Northwestern Division. So it's a large network of lines. I should point out that you'll see from Flint to Detroit dotted lines marking DUR. DUR was the Detroit United Railway, which was a Detroit-based electric railway system with various lines. They had a line from Detroit to Port Huron, another up to Emily City, the line from Detroit to Flint, then to Pontiac, Farmington, and west from Detroit to Jackson. Finally, they had a line from Detroit down to Toledo, where they connected with a larger electric railway network that spread out across Indiana and Ohio. So it was a large network of lines. There were operating agreements beginning in April 1911. There was such a demand for traffic to run from Kalamazoo through Battle Creek all the way into Detroit without changing cars, without changing trains. So they executed an agreement with the Connecting Detroit United Railway in April 1911 to run through trains from Kalamazoo into downtown Detroit, running on the Detroit United tracks from Jackson to Detroit. And so they changed crews in Jackson. Passengers could ride through, and there was another part of this agreement. They had a daily round trip they called the Capital Flyer that ran from Lansing to Jackson to Detroit. In the morning from Lansing, they went into Detroit. In the evening, they returned from Detroit back to Lansing. The Detroit United and Michigan Railway Company provided a pool of cars for this joint service. And so what they did was, because there was third rail on portions of the Michigan Railway, they added third rail shoes, pickup shoes, power pickup shoes to the Detroit United cars that were using this pool of service. What I mean by third rail pickup shoes, these electric railway cars would run on 600 volt direct current. Typically, like in the cities or in other places, they would run off of an overhead trolley. They would have a pole mounted on the roof of a car where they were able to pick up the 600 volts. That power fed lights, air compressor, motors, and it went to ground through the rail. The power went to ground through the rail. The same thing was true when they were on the third rail, other than they were getting their power from a hot energized rail that was a higher level than the running rail, but it was off to the side. And it was a risky thing to have exposed rail close to where people or animals could get to it, but the right-of-way was all fenced off, and they had cattle guards at all the crossings. You really had to work. If you wanted to get at the third rail, you could, but you really would not want to get too close to it because it was pretty risky. But as far as the line between Flint, Saginaw, and Bay City, there was also an agreement with the Detroit United to run through trains. And in this particular case, the Michigan Railway, north of Flint, was high voltage. It was not 600 volts, it was 1200 volts. The Detroit United cars did not have the capability of running at all on anything higher than 600 volts. I suppose they could, if they, by accident, got on the hot wire or hot track, they might go real fast for a period of time, then they'd probably burn up because they'd be seeing twice the amount of power that they needed to run. So it was all 1200 volts north of Flint to Saginaw and Bay City. So the through service could not be Detroit United cars because they could not run on the high voltage. So all the through cars, they often ran two-car trains from Bay City all the way to Detroit. And it was always with Michigan Railway cars. So these cars on the Detroit United, coming into Detroit, on the Detroit United, they used the Detroit United passenger station as a corner of Jefferson Bay Streets. They would board and deboard cars on Bay Street because they did not want to tie up the traffic on busy Jefferson Avenue. But that was a large building at Jefferson Bates. That was the general offices for Detroit United, and it was also, they had a big waiting room, ticket office, and so forth at that location. So, and of course today, downtown Detroit, that whole area has been all leveled. Nothing bears any semblance to what it had been years ago. So, when we look at the map, we see Lansing, and we really need to think about, there was no railroad that ran directly north from Lansing. It was north of Ithaca and Alma. You had maybe the Ann Arbor Railroad that ran north, but there was no direct railroad immediately north, running straight north from Lansing. There was a group of Lansing businessmen in the 1870s, I think it was. They proposed a line from Lansing north through St. John's, Ithaca, Alma, and perhaps up to Mount Pleasant. But that plans fell through and nothing developed. So it sat idle until 1897. In 1897, a group of Lansing business people got together and they said, well, we'll try again. We will attempt again to build a railroad north from Lansing to St. John's, Ithaca, Alma, and to St. Louis, Michigan. And so they formed in 1897 the Lansing, St. John's, and St. Louis Railway. Instead of a steam railroad like the original plan had been, there was a new form of public transportation, intercity electric railways. They called them the interurban, a term that was popular probably in the teens and the 20s, but today you'd say, I rode the interurban, people look at you and say, what are you talking about? But in 1920, someone would say, I rode the interurban, but they'd understand that it was an intercity electric railway. But, so that was the plan. They wanted to build a line north to St. Louis. And they had been able to interest a group of money, a family, the Mills family from Port Huron and Marysville, who had made a lot of money in Michigan logging. They were into shipping, shipbuilding, various things. And in 1897, because probably they realized the logging in Michigan was was almost all spent, so they decided to get into something new, of electric railways. So they put a lot of their own money into the construction of the line, and they hired some experts to come in from Chicago to help them lay out a route, to help them design it. And what they ended up with is a design for a route that was being provided by the business people from Lansing. They were going to fund the getting the property, and the plan that they had. They wanted to build north of Lansing in the right-of-way of Turner Road, which wandered around uphill, down dale, around a lot of curves and so forth. And the person that they had hired from Chicago to help them give the plans to build this line, they said, no, wait a minute. There's very low population density north from Lansing. If you rely on passenger service only, this won't exist. It will fail right away. So you need to build this line capable of running freight service. And that's what they did. So the right-of-way that was selected by the Lansing business people, they threw it in the ditch, and they said, we don't want that. We want to have a line that's going to avoid all these hills, avoid all these curves, and build it to run freight, and that's what they did. In the same token, the territory with a low population density going north from St. John's to Ithaca, Elm, and St. Louis, it just would not support an electric railway, so they scrapped the plan, and the road never did extend anything further north than St. Louis, St. John. So they built the line. They ran into trouble electrifying it. They started service with steam for the first couple of years, and they finally completed electrification in 1904, I think it was. And the people who had built the line, the Mills interest, now owned the line. They owned the controlling interest in the line to St. John's. They had trouble in Lansing getting the okay of the people that owned the street railway. They wanted to be able to run the interurban cars from St. John's all the way to downtown Lansing. The street railway said, no, you can't go any closer to downtown than the corner of Michigan and Cedar Streets. Well, this wasn't going to work. So the Mills interest buy the street railway, and then they could do whatever they wanted. And not only that, they formed a new company, the Lansing and Suburban Traction Company, that consisted of the street railway in Lansing and also the interurban of St. John's. So that was all happening like 1903 and 1904, and about that same time, the same interest, the Mills interest, by the Jackson Battle Creek Traction Company, which is the line that had been built in 1903 west from Jackson to Battle Creek. At that same time, they also purchased the Michigan Traction Company, which is the line that continued west from Battle Creek to Kalamazoo. So that gave them a railroad, an electric railroad, was already built, was already in service. They just changed the name on the cars and the timetables, and they made them a line that ran through from Jackson to Battle Creek and Kalamazoo. And so now they realize, okay, we've got the Lansing operation, we have the operation west from Jackson to Kalamazoo, so they incorporated the Lansing and Jackson Railway to tie the two cities together. And this just starts building the network. And I think with that I'll start showing pictures, but just giving you that as like an overview a little bit of some of the history. Lansing streetcars, started out in the 1870s as horse cars, and this is a State Archives photo taken at the main intersection in Lansing at the Washington and Michigan Avenues, and we're looking northeast in that photo. Now those are two horse cars that dated to the 1870s, and judging by the crowd and the fact there's two horse cars in the photo, this might even have been the opening day of horse car service, I don't know, but anyway, we know the location, and we know it's an early photo. The streetcars in Battle Creek and Jackson were built in a very quick manner by a group of people that also built the street railway in Muskegon. They were unusual. This is a small car, and they built it really quickly, very hastily, and quite cheaply. And instead of the standard 4-foot, 8.5-inch gauge between the rails, these cars are 3 feet wide. The rail gauge was 3 feet. And so you look at the thing, it's a very small car. So, but the cars in Jackson and in Muskegon were also very similar, very small streetcars. But this is probably opening day in the 1870s in Battle Creek. Well, in the case of Lansing, they converted the street railway in 1900, August of 1900, from horse car to electric railway. This photo is, the conversion was done by Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company, and this photo is out of a Westinghouse magazine, I think commemorates the first day of service with the electric cars in Lansing. We're seeing here a northbound car, probably the very first day, a lot of people on the car. He's heading northbound on Washington Avenue and downtown at Washtenaw Streets. And the building in the background was the famous Downey House, later the site of Knapp's department store, if anybody's familiar with Lansing from the 1960s or earlier. But the car behind is probably an now out of service horse car, and they're just another place they can throw people to add to the load. So anyway, this was August of 1890. Again, Lansing, obviously, and we're looking west on Michigan Avenue, and again, this is an early electric streetcar heading westbound. Now we look at the early days of electrification in Jackson, and Jackson was, I think they converted from horse car to electric in about 1891. Now this conversion in Jackson required building all new track structure, because remember, Jackson's streetcars had been 3-foot gauge, and then they rebuilt the whole system with an electric railway at 4-foot, 8.5-inch gauge, so they had to put in a whole new track. And then also, of course, they had to put up all the poles to support the trolley wire, buy cars that would have the electric motors that would run on 500 or 600 volts direct current, and they had to have generating capacity to treat the power and so forth. So, just a second here. So, let's see. So now we look at Owosso-Corunna. Of course, Owosso had been a manufacturing community, so they had industry there. Corunna was the county, and was the county seat of, I think that's Shiawassee County. And they instead, for their street railway, this is the Owosso-Corunna Street Railway Company, they started out probably in the late 1890s with steam dummies. Now, what's a steam dummy? Well, it's like a streetcar body, a box with windows that was really a steam engine. So they had two of these buzzards. One is named the Owosso and the other Corunna. And you can't really see the workings, but there were steam engines that turned the wheels on the Owosso and on the Corunna. Well, this is great. These were Healy, what they called Healy motors, built by a Healy company in Detroit. And looks like they also had acquired a batch of probably ex-Detroit horse cars that they could tow. But the problem was, these things didn't have any guts. So you get a couple inches of snow, and they could just barely run without having to deal with the snow, but they couldn't get through. It was a flop. So then they turned around, they got some more powerful steam dummies, and they kind of struggled for a while until they electrified in the mid-1890s. But this is just an example of very early days of the Owosso and Corunna Street Railway Company, and examples of a couple of pretty worthless steam dummies. A little bit better days, this is at the south end of Corunna, and probably 1900 era, but it's one of the replacement electric cars that the electrification dated to the mid-1890s. And so this is at the south end of Corunna. They had a line that headed straight south from the county courthouse down to an area where they had railroad stations for both the Ann Arbor Railroad and the Grand Trunk. And this kind of odd rough building in the background is still there today, and that was, I think, part of the city waterworks. All right, we're here looking at the Michigan Central Railroad being crossed by not one electric railway, but two that were running side by side. So we see in the foreground the double track line of the Michigan Central that ran from Detroit to Jackson, Kalamazoo to Chicago. Today it's still running as Amtrak service. And in the photo we see one of the Michigan Railway cars that had been built to run on a line from Jackson to Grass Lake, a line that was intended to run beyond Grass Lake. Construction was started and it never was completed. It was supposed to build all the way to Detroit, and that didn't happen. Why? Because the bridge in the background is the Detroit United, which is a competing electric railway that did actually complete from Detroit to Jackson. And so we had, coming out of Jackson, both the Michigan Railway, which we see this car on the bridge, and also Detroit United, they came out along Pearl Street, came out along Page Avenue, excuse me, coming out of Jackson, heading toward Michigan Center. The tracks of one company was on one side of Page Avenue, and then the competing company was running on the other side of Page Avenue. So they ran side by side from Jackson all the way out to Michigan Center, and then by the time they get out here to the bridge, this is east of Michigan Center, the two railroads are spread a ways apart, but close enough where you can see the bridges from both in the same photo. So the fact that they wanted to build an electric railway, or two electric railways between Detroit and Jackson, when they had this really rapid Michigan Central Railroad, it made no sense. So. Okay, a steam locomotive. This is at the steam locomotive stopped at a water tank to get a drink of water. This is for the couple of years that they were running steam before they electrified the line from Lansing to St. John's. And the scene of this photo, there's a creek where they had the water tank a couple miles south of DeWitt. So it's a pretty neat photo, and it just shows that interim period of time before they electrified the line to St. John's. Well, they eventually did electrify it. It was in 1904. They completed the electrification, and they then they could put the steam locomotives to bed. But here we see a photo of one of the early Lansing to Jackson streetcars. He's making the turn in the photo from northbound on Washington Avenue, turning eastbound onto Michigan Avenue. Of course, the Capitol is in the background. So they went out Michigan Avenue. The station was in that hotel we've seen in the picture at the corner of Washington and Washington streets. But so they came out Washington Avenue to Michigan, went west, went east for a few blocks to Cedar Street, then north on the way to St. John's. All right, a Rodney Choate photo. I met Rodney Choate. I was chasing down former employees, trying to get as much information as I could. Rodney Choate had been referred to me by somebody that would attend company picnics. Somebody was from Kalamazoo. And so I called him. I asked if I could visit him. I wanted to tape record him, and it was great. He was in his mid-90s. I shook his hand, and you could feel the bones rattle. It was just, but he was sharp as a tack, and he had worked on the streetcars until they opened the interurban service in 1904. So he got a promotion from the city streetcars in 1904 to interurban service, and he continued in interurban service until when the line shut down. But he commented, the day of this photo, these two cars had been in service between Lansing and St. John's, and both had plows on. They've been plowing snow, as you can see here. So this photo was taken. Both are headed eastbound on Michigan Avenue at the switch where they turn north onto Cedar Street. I think some of the buildings in the background are still there. This would be looking southwest from the corner of Cedar and Michigan Avenue. So we see a lot of snow. You can see they've been really bucking the snow on these interurban cars. And the conductor has a switch iron. Now the switch iron is a long iron device with a handle. You can see he's hanging onto the handle. Now what he does is he's going to throw the switch. Well, the switch is just a movable point in the track. So he takes that bar and he bars that point over, so it will redirect the track. Instead of continuing east on Michigan Avenue, it'll turn them north going on Cedar Street. We have the museum. We have switch irons like that. We have a couple of Tonga-made switches. So we're familiar. All these streetcars, all these interurban cars, always carry that switch iron hanging on the front of the car. So they were handy. They could jump off and throw a switch. Instead of just the usual railroad switch, these were switches that were actually in the street. So it was all the switch movement was done in the street. Okay, continuing north, in St. John's, the station was in the building we see in the photo, always in that building, and the courthouse is out of sight to the right. The street that the photographer is standing on is Clinton Avenue, would be the main street in St. John's. So they'd come in from Lansing. They would discharge their passengers here at the station a couple of blocks north of the railroad tracks, just opposite the courthouse. They'd go down the hill on Clinton Street, they'd turn the car at Railroad Street, and then head back up, load passengers, and they'd take off back for Lansing again. So it was about a 20-mile run each way between Lansing and St. John's. Yes, early days of the street railway service, the line was extended from Lansing out to the college, MAC, Michigan Agricultural College, and in this photo, the line had been completed to the west entrance to the college. In the background, you can see buildings on the campus. What we see here is the end of the wire, the end of the track, and an old horse car, trailer has been set out, so if they have they would run frequent service out from Lansing if there was an extra heavy crowd of people to ride back to Lansing again. They'd couple onto this thing. People would board this car, this ancient horse car, they would ride, but that would be coupled on the back, and they'd haul that back to Lansing. So just a way to accommodate an increase in traffic. So a few years later, they extended the line out Michigan Avenue. That photo was along Michigan Avenue. And then as you come into East Lansing, Michigan Avenue and Green River come together. And about that point, they built a line south onto the campus at Michigan State, today Michigan State University. So what we see here, there's a track and a car coming back from the loop that they had on the campus of the school. And the track in the foreground was either a line going out to Pine Lake at Hazlet, today's Lake Lansing, which was built 1904, and it served a company-owned amusement park at Pine Lake. Or maybe by the time of this photo, they had extended the line beyond Hazlet, and they're running all the way through to Owosso. But anyway, we see here, though, a streetcar coming off the campus. They had a loop out of sight in the photo, but there was a loop back here, and they would run this car into Lansing, and they routed the cars that were used in the service out of the school, routed with what they call the Belt Line that went up to the northwest side of Lansing. All right, this is Grand River Avenue in East Lansing. The college would be on the right, and we're looking down the main street of Grand River Avenue in East Lansing. Now in the background, you see that square box indicator. That's a crossing box that's saying you're going to cross a railroad track. So that tells us that this is where it's looking toward MAC Avenue, where the electric railway turned north on MAC and headed its way toward Hazlet, and eventually all the way through to Owosso. So it's an early photo, probably in the 20s, I suppose, but I'm not really a good judge of the era of cars, but anyway. So this is Marsh Road. Marsh Road exists even today as a route from East Lansing or maybe Okemos to get to Hazlet. The bridge here was getting pretty dilapidated by the time of the photo, but it's a bridge across the Grand Trunk Western. The tracks on the right, those are the Grand Trunk tracks that go to Port Huron, and then the interurban is the track on the left. And in the background, under the bridge, you can see some trace of the right-of-way turning north. They had a Y east of Hazlet Road, where if they're coming out of Lansing with a streetcar going to Pine Lake or Lake Lansing, they would turn north on the west leg of the Y, or if they're coming in on an interurban car that was routing by way of Pine Lake or Lake Lansing, they would take the east leg of the Y and run up to Pine Lake around the loop and then continue to run into Lansing. So it's a pretty neat photo because it really gives you a good perspective of the situation at Hazlet. So this is one of the double truck open cars, summer cars, as you can well imagine, and at Pine Lake or Lake Lansing. In the background, you can just kind of make out the lake. Here, the railway owned a dance hall, a casino, a roller coaster, all the things you'd expect to find at an amusement park. Street railway owned amusement park. And this, though, is on the loop. So they come up, run around the loop, and head back into Lansing. Then the railway also owned another park Pine Lake was northeast of Lansing. Southwest of Lansing was Waverly Park. And Waverly Park was also owned by the company. We can see in the photo a streetcar that's come off from Lansing on St. Joseph Street, or St. Joseph Avenue, whatever, and is turning around at the loop at Waverly Park. Now, Waverly Park used to be Ledley's Park. Ledley was a guy who had probably his hands in too many things. He owned the park. He had a business on North Washington Avenue. He was working on a high ladder on the back of that property that he owned. He fell off the ladder. He was killed. So his heirs sold the property to the railway. The railway held a contest to rename it We'll Be Them, but they continued to call it Ledley's Park. And the contest called for a new name, Waverly. Thus was born Waverly Park. Waverly Park was the reason the County Line Road, which is north-south at that point, has been renamed Waverly Road. And it is today. So this is on the north side of the Grand River at Waverly Road. And again, this is one of the two amusement parks owned and operated by the railway in the Lansing area. Just a photo of the figure-8 roller coaster at Waverly Park. They had a hotel there. It was quite an attraction while it lasted. Now I think the railway sold those parks by the teens, late teens. They weren't making any money, so they sold them off to other interests. I mentioned they were building an electric railway between Jackson and Lansing, and that was to tie the properties together. The Lansing operations were those that were served operations west of Jackson to Battle Creek and Kalamazoo. Well, they started construction in 1904 or 1905, and they ran into trouble with the city of Mason. Such trouble that their construction was delayed until November of 1909 before they completed the line. And this marks the completion, the first two trains running through from Jackson to Lansing. The photo is taken at the north end of the business area in Leslie. The buildings on the right side of the photo are still there today. But you know, imagine starting construction in 1904 and not being able to complete because of arguments over right-of-way getting through the city of Mason. That's a whole other story, but it was a big deal. So anyway, this marks the opening of service through from Jackson to Lansing. All right, this is a construction photo in Hazlitt. The tracks in the background and the station are on the Grand Trunk Western. They're placing ties here and rail across this street, and this is to make the connection between Morris and Owosso with a railway that had been already extended up to Hazlitt. So this is in Hazlitt. In the background, you see a construction locomotive, and that's a little steam locomotive, the steam locomotive that they were using to construct the interurban. This line did not complete until 1911. Ah, yes. So what happens if you have a house in your right-of-way? Oh, shucks. You know, they say, okay, well, we want to build a railroad. I'll tell you what, we'll move your house for you. And the farmer owned right-of-way on the south side of the Grand Trunk, which is the Grand Trunk tracks are here. It's what this house is sitting across. And you notice they got all the piling up to compensate for the lowered right-of-way of the tracks. And this house exists today. Not that long ago, this is between Perry and Morris. The house is unmistakable. It's on the south side of the Grand Trunk track, still stands, unmistakable, and it's kind of a dump. I shouldn't say that. I don't know who's here. But, so the building exists. I can just say that much. So, at least for the time being. But it's, so what happens if you have a train? This is a double track railroad. This is the connection between Toronto, Port Huron, and Chicago. And I suspect that maybe the engineer didn't know. This is going to clear, but you can see brake shoe smoke. So the engineer is on the right-hand side. He's not going to see this thing. But I look at, he dumped the air. He put it in an emergency. That's brake shoe smoke, I'm sure. So I can only imagine the surprise he had when he saw that thing was almost in his way. It got clear of it, but the note on the photo said such and such passing at 50 miles an hour. But yowee. But I'm sure that's brake shoe smoke. And I'm sure he was probably a little concerned, the guy that was running the train. So, hydroelectric power. I had mentioned that a lot of the electric railways, Michigan Railway in particular, got their power from hydro dams. And the very first one was significant hydro dam at Trowbridge Township, Allegan County, just south of Allegan on the Kalamazoo River. Significant in that this was the first installation to run a high voltage transmission line. It was 40,000 volts over a great distance. So they fed power from here all the way into Kalamazoo. And that power was used to run the streetcars in streetcar lines at probably 600 volts in Kalamazoo. But it's significant because it was a long distance high voltage transmission line that actually worked. And this is probably 1897, 1898. So this just comments that Foote and his Commonwealth Power Company, later Consumers, or later still today Consumers Energy, fed numerous dams on the hydro dams on the and they named the Kalamazoo, the Grand Osado, Muskegon, and Manistee rivers. I also make a comment in here. The biggest customer for the power company was the railway until about 1916. So when they were building these electric railways, because of the close affiliation between the power company and the railway, they were building the right-of-ways wide enough to accommodate both the railway and the high voltage transmission lines. So what we see in this photo is the right-of-way of the interurban that was not open until May of 1915, connecting Grand Rapids with Kalamazoo. Construction photos of this line show these high-tension towers are already in place when the interurban was being constructed. Those transmission towers are still there today. The interurban quit in June of 1929, but those darn towers are still there and they're still pumping electricity, even today. Galvanized steel, they're still, I guarantee you they're still in use. So, and they predate the interurban. So, and then the interurban, opening in May of 1915, quitting in 1929, they never paid off their construction costs. It was just, it was way too late. And that was kind of the woes of these electric railways. They were really born about the time of the birth of the automobile. So there was always that competition. And we know the winner. So all you need to do is drive on the expressway to Detroit every day. They had, on the line between Lansing and St. John's, they had two substations, one in DeWitt and another County Farm. County Farm was just north of St. John's. County Farm was a wood structure. It was struck by lightning, burned to the ground, and then the railway, about 1812, this all happened, and they built this new substation building in Myrtle Beach. They had a siding here at Myrtle Beach. That was one of the 2 places on the line to St. John's where they loaded sugar beets. And so that building still exists today. It's been sided over as a peak roof, but it's somebody's house, still. Inside, they had 2 machines, 2 rotary converters. The one closest to us, you can see, is not moving, but the one behind, you can see is blurred. The machine is spinning. Now these, you'd have a high voltage transmission line, probably 110,000 volts, and feeding transformers. Then they got probably 440 volts, 450 volts running these rotary converters that had an output of 600 volt direct current. And I think these are probably, judging by size, I would guess they're either 300 or 500 kW rotaries. Ah, yes. A photo that I think, despite the quality of the photo, it really tells the story about the importance of these interurban lines, especially when it came to the rural farmers. And so what we see in the photo is a road that probably would turn into soup in the spring, and in the winter would be equally impassable. We see a farmhouse on each side of the railroad track, each side of the road. You see an outhouse. But you see there is a shelter. That's a place where you could wait out of the elements, wait for an interurban car. That's probably the lady of the house. She's going to ride the interurban into town. You see the crossing box, which is if you're driving down the road, that's telling you you're going to cross a railroad. So what she has done, she saw the car coming. It's probably approaching the crossing 60 miles an hour, realistically. So she flagged it down, and she knows that the motorman who's running it has flashed the lights to indicate that he sees the signal that she wants the darn thing to stop. So, so the brakes are on, and the conductor, you can just barely see him. He's opened at the back door. He's got his stool out. So when this thing stops, that door and those rear steps will be where she's standing. So the thing will come to a stop. The conductor will help her board, throw that stool on, pull the bell cord, 2 pulls, 2 bells is proceed. It's a signal to the motorman to take off. And they might go another couple miles, and maybe somebody wants to get off, or maybe somebody else wants to get on. So a local car would stop at most rural crossings. The limited would only stop at towns. So, but it just shows the significance of, for a short period of time, this is the way that people were able to get into town and out of town to shop or for whatever. So, but I like the photo because of the story, the quality. I'd like to have used the photo, but it's just the image is not good. But this is on the line between Lansing and St. John's. We tried to do something with the photo, but it was, Doug, you know better than I. It was beyond hope. So anyway, this is another waiting shelter on the line between Lansing and St. John's. They'd have a name, probably the name of a farmer who allowed them use of the right-of-way. You can see there's windows. The right-of-way is running along the side. There's windows on both sides of the building, so you can look either way. The shelter doesn't have any heat, but the door is closed. You keep the wind out, and so. All right, another view that for me really helps explain the use of the interurban railways and how they come right into the heart of a business area, unlike the steam railroads. So the interurban through Lansing they ran from Jackson to Lansing to Owosso. And so a crew would pick up a car in Jackson, and they might make 4 or 5 round trips a day from Jackson to Lansing to Owosso, return at Owosso, and then return to Jackson again. In Lansing, now we're looking east on Michigan Avenue from Washington Street. The track switches are to turn northbound or southbound onto Washington Avenue. So we're looking east. We can see where the snow hasn't melted. That's where the bridge is over the Grand River. Just beyond there, the Interurban had a station, a storefront, on the north side of Michigan Avenue, east of the river bridge. An Interurban car, which we see in the photo, has stopped at the station, and people were waiting for it. They were waiting on the safety island. They're waiting in the street. And these people are also waiting for it on the safety island. So what they're going to do is they want to ride perhaps to Holt or to Mason, Leslie, maybe go all the way through to Jackson. But, you know, the steam railroad, you had stations that were maybe a couple miles away, possibly. And here, they're running right into the heart of the business area. And they're going to pick up passengers, load them in the street, and then take them down to Jackson, if that was their destination. If that was their destination. So it's another photo that I think helps explain the function of the electric railways, the services that they had provided, the interurban lines. There was a 5-year period of time that the Michigan Railway had leased a steam railroad that had connected Kalamazoo with South Haven, and they wanted to electrify it, but the railroad was too terribly worn out to even consider electrifying it, so they gave up the lease on the thing. But this just shows a steam locomotive hauling a coach on that Kalamazoo Lakeshore in Chicago, which was also known as the Fruit Belt Line. That was a failed effort to get a connection to Lake Michigan boats to Chicago for boat service, for transportation through to Chicago. Yes, this is a McGuire Cummings built snow sweeper, single truck snow sweeper, and he's, I think this is a State Archives photo, but I know where the photo is. This is in Lansing. He's sweeping snow, heading westbound on Michigan Avenue, and these buildings are still here today. So we're at Larch. This is in the block between Larch and the Union Station. This is the north side of the street. Those buildings are still there, or at least they were probably the last time I was in Lansing. So this is pretty neat. Now we have these McGuire Cummings sweepers were pretty common. Every city had one. We have one at the museum, and we run it. I run the thing. Had the sweeper running, and so you have 2 motors, providing that you got 2 axles. So one motor is running each axle. So you've got motors to run it. Then you have another motor inside to run the brooms. And there's heavy cables or chains that are connected to the sweeper brooms. And the brooms are heavy bristle bamboo, and they really kick up the snow. So, but we've run it to the museum a couple times. It's ours. It's identical to this, and it really is neat to see the snow kick up. So, I think I kind of lost connection here, but if everybody can still hear, anyway, that's a snow sweeper, and he's really throwing the snow in the city streets. Okay, another example of snow plowing, and this is on the interurban line south of Owosso. So when you come out along the Grand Trunk Western on the interurban at Morris. The line had turned straight north, running parallel to the road all the way into Owosso. In the background, you can see one of the high-tension towers that are feeding power from the Ossabaw River all the way down to Battle Creek. And that transmission line was built in interurban right-of-way. So, being a north-south line, preventing winds from the west, these cuts would drift in full of snow. So, they knew this was going to be a blast for them, so they let the photographer out, I'm sure, stationed them here. They probably backed up for a half mile. They got this buzzard up to 50 miles an hour and hit the drift. And we can see it really is a neat shot. So it's just, that's pretty good. So. Yes, Rodney Choate. I mentioned him. He started in 1904 on the interurbans. I told him that we had car 28 at the museum, that I had found it at Charlotte Landing, Duck Lake, about 12 miles north of Albion, and had moved it down to the museum. And he said, now this is a fellow that had been around a while. He was 95 years old at the time. I said, we have car 28. And he jumps up, and he runs off, literally, and he came back with this photo. This is the first time he had run one of the brand new steel cars, and it was car 28, the car that we had saved. So what he had done, he picked the car up in Jackson. First time to run one of the brand new cars. This was in July of 1914, June or July of 1914. So he ran it up to Owosso. And the photo, he's in front of the Owosso station, so he had commissioned this photo to be taken. Well, he went down to the corner, which is, this is on Washington, is North-South Street in Owosso. The building in the background is Main Street. So he went west on Main Street to Westtown. He turned the car at Main and Lansing Streets, and he came back to the station, and they posed for the photo. So there's Rodney Choate, there's the station, there's the baggage wagon, probably the station agent, and his conductor was Ledley. Ledley, if anybody's from Lansing, you might have heard of Estes Ledley Funeral Home. After the railway quit, he got into the funeral business. So that's a fellow who then found a career after the interurban and shut down my throat, excuse me. This is a 4-car train at Gogak Lake, just south of Battle Creek. These were steel cars that would run multiple car trains. A 2-car train at North Concord. This would be heading from Kalamazoo to Detroit. The Michigan Central's in the background, and we see a motorized velocipede that's in the siding. That's the crews out working on track. They did have a group of cars that were parlor cars in service between Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo, and Grand Rapids and Battle Creek. So this is a company photo of the interior one. This is an exterior view of one of the parlor cars coming into Grand Rapids. You can see the parlor seats in the back. This is crossing Kendall Street, coming into Grand Rapids. The map just shows the interconnecting network of interurban railways in the state. They handled a lot of freight. This is at a freight house on the interurban in Jackson, and so this is a motor car, and then there's a freight boxcar behind it that he's hauling. These freight cars of Michigan Railway made it at great distances. This is at an interurban freight house in Youngstown, Ohio. This is on the Penn, Ohio system. This is at Myrtle Beach substation, just north of Lansing, and with a load of sugar beets. At North Yard on the interurban, a Rodney Choate photo. He's got a whole string of cars, including 4 cars loaded with sugar beets that he's pushing back onto the connection to the Pere Marquette Railroad. Freight house in Kalamazoo, freight house in Battle Creek. The front of the freight house on Erie Street in Albion, fairly long freight train, and that's one of the people on the left is a person who had been a lot of help, but he had been a motorman on the line and loaned me this photo, gave me this copy. Freight operation at the freight station and passenger station in Augusta. This freight train is heading toward Kalamazoo. On the edge of Augusta, they had what they called Gull Lake Junction, and this is a freight train coming in probably from Allegan with a long string of stock cars and a caboose at the rear. So it's they would handle some pretty heavy freight traffic. Abandonments, this just gives you the dates. Everything was, all the interurbans were done for by the end of June in 1929. Street railways in Battle Creek and Kalamazoo quit in late 1932. Lansing quit April of 33. And the last was the Jackson Rapid Transportation Company. The Jackson streetcars quit in June of 1936. This was the last electric railway in the state outside of Detroit. Detroit quit in 1956. I remember seeing and riding the streetcars in Detroit. So they lasted late enough for me to see. So, and that's it. So, hope you enjoyed it.
That was amazing. The freight train, how many cars they had, that was crazy. Anyway.
Yeah, we don't often think about the freight services, but that was very real. And you see them in photos. It was pretty significant, the freight business. So, and that's why I wanted to preserve one of the freight cars.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Question. Oh.
Thanks a lot.
See ya.
On the topic of the freight service, I wonder if you could tell the story of the train full of office furniture. Do you have a photo coming out of its factory in Bay City, Saginaw, maybe?
Saginaw, yeah. Yeah. Yes, they had, there was a string of, I don't know, 15 interurban freight cars were loaded at Saginaw. They were at the Saginaw Freight House, and they were being handled all the way through. They were all loaded with furniture for Marshall Field and Company, and they were being taken to the in Battle Creek. They had a sanatorium. The destination for those loaded freight cars, I think there were 14 or 15, a long string of freight cars. They ran them all the way through Detroit and all the way from, this was in Saginaw. The photo was taken before they were run all the way through Detroit, over the Detroit United Railways, over the city streetcar tracks in Detroit, all the way through to Battle Creek. So, yep.
Other questions?
Yeah, I do. Over here.
Where is the museum?
Where's the museum?
Illinois Railway Museum is in Union, Illinois, 65 miles northwest of Chicago.
Yeah, I live in Shepherd, Michigan. When was the line run from St. John's, which now goes to Ithaca and then jogs over to Elma through Shepherd, goes to Mount Pleasant, and then on up to Clare, and then goes over to Lake Station up to Cadillac. When was all that connected?
The question is a steam railroad that I really don't know anything about. I can't answer that.
Okay.
My area of knowledge is the electric railways.
Right.
I'm sorry,
It got declared 1879.
1879.
okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't, yeah.
Sir, I've been to the museum
At Union.
at Union. I cannot believe how wonderful it is. You had, what, 400 pieces of rolling stock or something, brother? And they have great food at a low price. It's a fabulous thing for children to see.
Wow. Well, thanks for saying that, and you know, we're all volunteers. We're not supported by anything other than the donations. So it's just, but thanks.
He also told me earlier that they have trains that take you for a ride. I want to do that.
Yeah, we have that's a 10-mile round trip. We have a one mile long streetcar loop around the property. We have over 500 pieces of equipment now, I think. So we have steam trains, diesel trains, electric streetcars, interurban equipment, and so forth. So it's.
I was surprised that they had these power lines available as early as 1890. I didn't realize that.
Power lines.
The lines that.
Yeah. Well, the one at Trowbridge was a first example of a long-distance transmission. That was 1897 or 1898, which was a record breaker because it was so early.
Yeah, I was surprised at that because, I mean, I rode on streetcars in Des Moines, Iowa that still had the overhead line.
Oh, yeah.
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 So that power was converted from AC to DC for the railroad.
Correct. It was the railways were not all railways, but all the railways in Michigan, other than the St. Clair Tunnel, they were all direct current. St. Clair Tunnel was DC, was AC.
John and I are here, excuse me, John and I are here from Clare County. Are you familiar at all with the Grand Rapids Electric Train Company? It never got off the drawing board, but it was going to go from Grand Haven to Alpena across the center of Michigan.
Yeah, there were so many proposals that never went anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the proposals were maybe to generate money by promoters and maybe were never even intended to complete. I don't know, but there were a bunch that never made it, and that was another one.
Yeah, we discovered this 12-foot long map of the proposed railroad through Clare and Gladwin counties.
Yeah.
So at least reached that stage.
There were a lot of proposals that were made, but
That was it.
a lot of yeah, you couldn't build everything they wanted to do, I think.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask, did Henry Ford put the interurbans out of business, or did the steam railways? And I'd like to ask, from the photographs that you've shown, there was an immense amount of infrastructure built by these interurbans. And what was the reason that was it the Depression? No, they started to fail before the Depression.
They shut down before the Depression. So Depression was what, October of 29. They had begun to fail. The question is, what happened with the railways? And they began to fail with the inflation during World War I. Michigan was unusual in that other places they were allowed to raise the rates of fare with increase in wages. Inflation was bringing up material costs and so forth. The railway, Michigan Railway, had the documentation from the Interstate Commerce Commission or from the Federal Railroad Administration, who was running the railroads during the war, that you could raise your rates to 3%, or it was not 3, it was 3 cents, I think. I might have the figure wrong, but the steam railroads were able to raise the rates. In the case of Michigan Railway, they raised the rates, and then the state attorney general brought suit against, it was the state attorney general and the people of Michigan versus Michigan Railway, and they forced them to lower the rates back to what they had been originally. And that was the beginning of the end. That was 1917, and they began to go into receivership in 1921, and it was really a bunch of things, probably politics more than anything else. But yes, the autos were a deciding factor.
I think this will have to be the last question before we can go to the reception and have some snacks. So, thank you.
You were just talking about Michigan. How much from the United States were there similar type operations?
How much was?
Well, you just showed us Michigan.
Yeah.
How about the rest of the country? Were there setups like that in the West Coast, in the South, in the East, besides the streetcars and cities? Were there any interlines?
The whole trend was pretty much nationwide. The street railways were really the nucleus for expansion into intercity operations. That was really predominantly in the Midwest, but a lot of operations in the West in addition, and in the East as well. So it was not just Michigan. So
thank you.
Well, thank you again, Norm. Fascinating, and love talks based on archival and original research, right? Thank you so much for all of those archival images.
Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me.